Hello and welcome to You with Jesus. I mentioned in an earlier episode that Jesus was polarizing. What we're going to look at in this passage is Jesus in classic attack mode. I'm not suggesting he raised his voice in this encounter. In fact, I think his tone was probably quite circumspect, but at the same time, cutting through like a hot knife through butter. And when I read Jesus speaking in this way, I love him even more. He's ruthless in his analysis, unconcerned about people's opinions, fearless in his approach, and filled with scathing wit. It's no wonder that such an approach with the establishment set him on a dramatic collision course, which would result in his crucifixion. And get this, everything Jesus says here, he's saying at a Pharisee's house, invited by the Pharisee to be a guest in his home for dinner. A Pharisee invited Jesus to eat with him, so he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash before the meal. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness, you foolish people. Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves which people walk over without knowing it." One of the experts in the law answered him, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." Jesus replied, "And you teachers in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others they will persecute. Therefore this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering." When Jesus went outside, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. Okay, where do we start with this? And this is just one such passage. There's another series of chapters towards the end of Matthew's Gospel that are equally extraordinary. First up, the Pharisee takes offense and is confused as to why Jesus does not wash before the meal. Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus never washed his hands before the meal, but I can imagine, and yes, I've taken some poetic license with my imaginings in the next few minutes, but I can imagine all eyes being on him as Jesus wanders in, and there's this large ceremonial jar as you walk in the front door. And you wouldn't dream of not washing your hands. Jews were taught from a young age the importance of washing your hands before eating. The Pharisees had devised a complex system of purity laws in addition to the laws laid down by Moses. And there was nothing wrong with the idea of washing your hands before a meal. In some Asian countries, they remove their shoes before the meal. Some families say grace before meals. In some countries, there's certain seating arrangements that must be observed. Sometimes you have to wait for the host to say certain words. None of these are, of course, wrong in themselves, but Jesus had a view that the man-invented purity laws of the Pharisees had become a burden to the people and were an obsession with outward practice in the absence of any inward reality. Let's face it, it's much easier to wash your hands than to let God search your hearts and expose any attitude in you that isn't helpful or loving. That would require admitting wrong and making things right. That's a lot harder than a quick hand wash. So Jesus, he gets to the ceremonial jar and rolls his sleeves up, and they're looking at him and he's looking at them, and he hesitates by the jar before walking right on by and waits for the reaction. And sure enough, they bite, to which he responds, "Well, it's pretty dumb when you think about it. You're going to fuss over externals when all the while you are full of greed and wickedness. And then he mentions generosity to the poor as an example of what life would look like if they didn't have greed and wickedness. Such generosity would show them to be truly clean. Okay, this dinner party hasn't quite got off on the right foot, and they're passing around the hors d'oeuvres. The host is quietly recovering from just being slam dunked by Jesus over hand washing when Jesus decides it's time to lighten the mood a little bit. So he dips his flatbread into the oil and into the minty herbs and the roux sauce, and he lifts it to his mouth and says, "Funny thing, you know, all these beautiful mints and herbs. I know you give 1/10 of these to the Lord." And just when they think they're being complimented for their worship to God, he says, "Big problem though," and their faces drop. True worship is ensuring justice for the oppressed. In that way, you can truly love God. By neglecting that more important priority, you're making a mockery of giving anything to God. You should be doing both. This is getting seriously awkward. Perhaps Jesus will relax after a nice glass of red and tell one of his interesting stories. But Jesus, well, he's only just getting started, and as he raises his knife and fork to begin the main meal, he looks at them. "You know what?" Dare they respond? "What?" "I don't need to, he's already speaking. I've been watching you guys." "Yep, you, watching you all." Wipes his mouth, belches quietly, and says, "Not a good look at all." The seating arrangements in the synagogue. I noticed that you gentlemen, you like to sit in the roped-off VIP section with the comfy cushions. You love those seats, don't you? They make you feel more important than others, which of course strokes your ego and reinforces your belief that everyone else is mere commoners, lay people, if you were. Meanwhile, you've carved out a neat professional class for yourself with all the rights and privileges of the elite. Quite pathetic, really. And in a synagogue, of all places, where the focus should be on God, you're supposed to be serving others, not parading your status. Oh, and as he takes another mouthful, in the marketplaces, I've seen you there too, all dressed up in your fancy robes, waiting for people to walk past and acknowledge how important you are. "Good day, Rabbi Ben Jehoianan. May the Lord bless you." Oh, you so love that stuff. It makes being a religious person so worthwhile. "What's for dessert?" Oh, yes, I know what you're like. You know when people of no importance die and they just bury them in any old place and they don't put any markers on it and no one knows, no one cares, and there's people in the grave and people are walking across them without a thought in the world because they're just worthless? That's you. You're not important at all. You're just like one of those unmarked graves. Yep, people are walking over you. They don't even know you're there. That's going to be your legacy. Sad, really, but true. And finally, one of the experts in the law can stand it no more. But he doesn't want to make too big a scene, but he feels the need to say something. So he manages to say, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us." Jesus, in true Jesus style, just pretends that he doesn't hear what was said. He's got a few things left unsaid. The host is squirming. Everyone is very uncomfortable. The only one who seems to be enjoying himself here is Jesus. Think you're an expert in the law, do you? Problem with that is you're only good at dreaming up laws for other people to follow. These are people who are already weighed down by the burdens of life, but oh no, you want to load them up with a whole bunch of don't do this and don't do that. That's your idea of being an expert? The only thing you're an expert at is in making it impossible for people to experience the joy of loving God. That's your forte. And those people, they become so burdened by all your made-up rules that they haven't got time or energy to give their hearts and love to God and others. Expert. Hardly. When you load people up with all these rules, you know they won't be able to do it. You actually set them up to fail. And you don't lift a single finger to help them out. You're like, good luck with that. And as he's finishing up with a strong cup of coffee and about to make his way to the door, having had a wonderful Friday night at the home of the Pharisees, he says, "Oh, and all the prophets of old, irony of ironies, you make a big fuss over their tombs And you have saints' days and anniversaries for this prophet and that prophet. When it was people like you who killed those same prophets because they spoke God's truth. He pauses for impact, knowing that they will do the exact same thing to him. And he gets up to go and he gets to the door and he walks out and pokes his head back around just to say one last thing. Woe to you, all of you, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. And with that, I bid you good night.